My sister Cheyenne died because a drunk driver ran her off the road. He lived, she did not. She was the only close family that I had left. We had been on our own since Cheyenne turned 18, and our mother kicked us out of her house so her new boyfriend and his 3 kids could move in. We bounced around between aunts, uncles, and friends before we finally had saved enough money to get our own place. Cheyenne and I had lived in an apartment. We got together on my 22nd birthday for the past 3 years. We had always been extremely close. We were only a year apart in age, so we always shared many of the same hobbies and interests. When she died, I felt like someone had ripped a huge, gaping hole in my life. I no longer had someone to stay up and watch movies with on the weekends, no one to share clothes with. No more Cheyenne. I didn't know how to deal with it at first. I kept expecting to wake up and hear her making noise in the kitchen, or come home from work to find her on the couch watching TV. Of course, that didn't happen. The apartment had a heavy silence hanging over it, and every sound I made would echo through the emptiness. I avoided her room for a while, but a few days after she died, I looked at some old pictures of us, Cheyenne and me at the beach, at one of our birthday parties with friends, and photo after photo of us on our yearly vacations. The funeral date was getting close. I wanted to remember a much happier, simpler time with her before I had to see her laying dead in a coffin and say goodbye to her as she was lowered into the ground permanently. I don't know how long I sat there, looking through photo albums and shoe boxes filled with pictures that didn't fit in the photo albums. When I got to the photo of us posing in front of Cloud Gate in Millennium Park, taken about 2 years ago, I noticed that the picture had changed. I vividly remember posing with our arms draped across each other's shoulders, but for some reason in this photo, Cheyenne wasn't standing next to me anymore. Instead, she was standing about a foot or so in front of me now. I took the picture out of the pile and set it aside, pinning it up on my wall. I obsessively checked the picture every few minutes, thinking that maybe I remembered that day wrong. But I know that I wasn't, and somehow she had moved. Of course, there was no logical way that the photo had somehow changed since it was taken, but I couldn't deny what I was seeing. Over the next few days, I kept an eye on it, and with every passing day, the Cheyenne in the picture got closer and closer. On the 3rd day, nothing else in the picture was visible except Cheyenne, who was now pressed up against the photo as if she was trapped and trying to escape. I took the photo off the wall and stared at it. Nothing was visible anymore except for my sister, pressed up against the entire photo. Now that she was so close up, I noticed her face had also changed. She was no longer smiling like she had been when the picture was taken. Instead, her features had morphed into a grimace that was somewhere between angry and sad. Her eyes and eyebrows were scrunched up as if she were mid-sob, but there was something else. She looked evil almost, which was not like Cheyenne. When I turned the photo on its side, I noticed that in some regions of the image, they were raised. There were like small bumps on the spots where her fingernails were in the picture, pressed up against it as if she were trapped on the other side. When I saw this, I ripped the picture into tiny pieces and threw them out. But it just kept happening. Every time I tore up a photo, she would just start to move in another photo, each time a little bit faster than the last. Eventually, I decided to just gather all the photos and shred them. I searched our entire apartment, making sure I hadn't missed a single picture of Cheyenne. Next, I went through my photo and deleted every picture I had of her, doing the same with all my electronic devices. I hesitated as my finger hovered over the delete button. These are the last memories I had of Cheyenne. Sure, her stuff was still in the apartment, but I was literally getting rid of all the images of my sister. How long would it take me to forget what she looked like? I stared at the last remaining picture of her. It had been taken just a few days before she died. She was in one of our friends' pools making a silly face up at the camera. I wanted to keep at least one picture of Cheyenne, but even as I stared at the photograph on the phone, I could see that it already started to change. The Cheyenne in the picture had started to climb out of the pool, and she looked furious. It was as if she knew this was her last attempt to get out. I stared as she pulled herself out of the water and onto the pavement, her arms outstretched towards me, ready to leap out. I quickly deleted the picture before she was able to, and just like that, every single picture of my dead sister was gone. Cheyenne was dead. I knew that. I had accepted that, but I couldn't ignore what I seen. She was trying to escape the pictures, and I had no idea why or how. I couldn't tell anyone else about this, of course. No one would believe me that my dead sister was trying to climb out of old photographs. The more I thought of it, the more I convinced myself that it wasn't Cheyenne, but rather some sort of evil spirit that had, for some reason, taken over. I wasn't usually one to believe in the paranormal, but there was no other explanation of what was happening. It was the only thing that made sense to me. The Cheyenne that was adamant about escaping the pictures didn't seem anything like the Cheyenne that I had grown up with. I went through the apartment with a fine-tooth comb, making sure I hadn't missed a single picture of her. Once I was sure that they were all gone, I relaxed. She couldn't get me now. Don't get me wrong, I would have loved to have my sister around still, but my sister was dead. Whoever that was attempting to escape the photographs was not her. I was completely sure of that. On the day of her funeral, I walked into the church and stood at the entrance for a while, looking around at our family members. There were only about 20 people there. We weren't close to many of them except for a few aunts, cousins, and some friends that we considered family. I thought about our mom for a second. I wondered if she ever took some time out of her new life to think about us. I wondered if she even knew that her oldest child was dead. When I saw the mahogany coffin at the front of the church, I froze. I could slightly make out Cheyenne's body lying inside of it. I could see her curly black hair, which appeared to have been left down and arranged carefully around her head. I walked up to the coffin after a few minutes and stared at my dead sister. She lay peacefully inside of the coffin, and I noticed they had kept her lucky ring on her right finger. She was wearing her favorite black dress with the lace sleeves. I stared at her, and the longer I looked, the weirder it felt. After a while, it seemed like she was breathing, and I rubbed my eyes a few times just to make sure. There was no way she was actually breathing, obviously. I blew it off as my eyes playing tricks on me. Maybe this was just too much for me, too final. I backed away from the coffin and found a seat on an empty pew. I dropped my head into my hands and took a deep breath to stop myself from freaking out or crying. The increasing sound of people urgently whispering a few feet away caught my attention, and I looked up. Well, what happened to it? It was fine when I got here. I saw them set it up. I looked up to see my Aunt Meredith talking to her husband, Toby. Well, it didn't just magically change, Meredith. I stood up and walked over to them. Is everything okay? I asked. Oh, yes. Don't worry, everything is fine. You just sit. Meredith rubbed my arm up and down, trying to lead me back to my seat. That's when I noticed the banner that had been set up to the left of the coffin. It was about the size of a movie poster and read, "In loving memory of Cheyenne Wilson." The picture on the banner was of a bridge. I stared at it for a while, trying to remember where I had seen it before. "What happened to Cheyenne's picture?" someone exclaimed. "What do you mean?" I asked, not taking my eyes off the banner. "Her picture is gone. Her graduation photo. Did they edit her out? Why would they do that?" The voices continued, but I had drowned them out as I realized what was happening. Of course, that's why I recognized the bridge. That bridge was where Cheyenne had taken her graduation photos a few months ago. Except now, she wasn't in the picture. I backed away from the banner, and I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I walked back towards the doors, but a scream caused me to spin back around. Meredith and her daughter were standing by the coffin, both of them with their backs turned to me. I watched Meredith turn around, still mid-scream. "She's gone! Cheyenne is gone!" she shouted. I ran back to the front of the church and pushed Meredith to the side. My hands gripped the sides of the coffin, and I could feel the nausea rising up through my stomach the longer that I stared at the now empty coffin. Cheyenne had finally managed to get out.